Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, June 1st, 2015, start of a brand new month. June is busting out all over the meadows and the hills. All right, enough of the music. We have lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone as soon as you call in. Now, obviously, the big news is that last night at midnight, the provisions of the Patriot Act, which authorized the NSA to spy on law-abiding American citizens not suspected of any wrongdoing, did expire. And, of course, the headlines are a little misleading. I'm looking at this one headline that came out of National Post. NSA loses power to collect Americans' phone records. That's not entirely accurate. They still have the power. What they don't have is a legal cover, at least for the moment. And I, for one, do not believe the NSA will obey any change to the law because they've been in violation of the law and the Constitution going all the way back to the 1980s when this whole spy on everybody system started being built under Project Echelon. So the NSA still has the capability to do it. The only way to guarantee the privacy of the American people is for those data centers to be shut down, the equipment inside sold off for surplus, and everybody who violated the Constitution to be tarred, feathered, hanged, drawn, quartered, burned, and the ashes peed on by a rabid wombat. Anything less will not work. And in point of fact, I think the government is trying to figure out some way to convince you your right to privacy has been restored. So you will not take steps to protect your business secrets from government agents who have a long track record of stealing Americans' business secrets for their own profitability, to give to cronies, do insider trading, so forth and so on. Now, the White House is slamming the Senate over this lapse. Say, how dare you let it expire here? Even though the FBI and the Department of Justice have now basically come out and admitted there was not a single major case that they were able to solve using this wealth of data gleaned from law-abiding American citizens. And even the NSA is saying they've got too much data to sift through to find whatever's going on. The logic was finding the needle in the haystack, and then they dumped more hay on the floor, and as a result, even NSA is saying they can't find the needles anymore. There is too much, because they're not focused on people who are actually suspected of wrongdoing. Now, given that all of this NSA spying on law-abiding citizens who are not suspected of any wrongdoing is a violation of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, and given that the oath of office of the President is an oath to that Constitution, Obama's basically committing an impeachable offense by lobbying the Senate to go on out and violate the Constitution one more time. Perhaps because of that, Obama's approval numbers are not very good. Story out of Investment Watch blog, only 22% of Americans strongly approve of Barack Obama, as opposed to 38% 38% who strongly disapprove. And the rest are kind of in between and not really sure what's going on and basically not paying attention. Governor Chris Christie, campaigning up in New Hampshire, is basically saying those civil liberties extremists are to blame and we need to keep the NSA surveillance. So he's a statist. He's a closet tyrant. He wants all of us spied on to make sure we're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts. And anybody who supports the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is now a civil liberties extremist. That's the word. If they're an extremist, you don't want to pay attention to them. Well, those civil liberties extremists are the reason we are our own country and not still part of the British Empire. We're going to grab a phone call here. Andrew in New York. Aloha, Andrew. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. How are you?
Doing fine.
It's a good thing that Rand Paul stood up and chose the path of his father.
In this one area, he definitely did. A lot of his other areas, he's gone off on his own course. And, yes, we can applaud Rand Paul for this, but some of his other policies, not too happy with, particularly Israel.
It's true. Like, he's trying to compromise in order to get ahead, and so is the other Republican candidates.
I'm sorry, this is a bad phone connection. He's trying to compromise what?
He's trying to appear popular to the Republican establishment.
Well, all candidates try and adopt a populist point of view, and they're out there playing to the largest audience of voters they can get, and still out there, demonstrating to their owners and handlers and campaign donors, their real masters, that they are going to support the agenda that's out there. That's why we have Lindsey Graham, who just declared today, and he's already out there saying on his first day as president he's going to send 10,000 troops against ISIS in the Middle East. So, but they're all pandering to the crowd right now. Our problem is that once the election is over, they forget about we the people and just go back to doing what they're paid to do by their donors and supporters.
Yeah. I could see them fear-mongering about the ISIS, like they'll be making up threats that ISIS is going to attack us if we don't pass the Patriot Act.
Well, I'm expecting there's going to be some kind of a fake terror attack, in this little gap between the expiration of the Patriot Act and the USA Freedom Act, which everybody's expecting to get ramrodded through Congress, tomorrow or Wednesday. And there's going to be some kind of a fake attack to say, see, we need to spy on all of you. And because that's the way that they're absolutely playing. And again, even though it is now technically illegal for the NSA to spy on you, I am convinced they are still doing it. And if you have business secrets you need to keep private, don't want to have them stolen off and given to some politician's crony or something, you need to take responsibility for securing your own data against a government with a long track record of complete untrustworthiness with the private information of we the people. Okay.
Also, they're using the NSA to blackmail other people in the government to go along.
Oh, there's no question they've been doing that. Judicial Watch has uncovered evidence that NSA has been spying on Supreme Court judges. And if you go back and look at Chief Justice Roberts during the Obamacare debate, he was against, he was opposed, and then all of a sudden at the 11th hour, he does an about-face, says it's legal under the Commerce Clause, is the deciding vote to pass Obamacare in the Supreme Court. Then he leaves the country and goes on vacation in Malta for a week to duck the press firestorm of what made you change your mind.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, you got it. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now then, last Friday, as you know, when we went off the air, we were very concerned about this latest Mohammed cartoon contest. Over in Arizona, we were very concerned that it was trying to set the stage for another Charlie Hebdo false flag. The good news is it did not happen. We were watching the live feed on the local TV stations, and they kept saying, peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. The police have pro and con on separate sides of the street. They're not letting them get close to each other. I did notice the INFOWARS coverage was really focused on the Muslim bashers. They were out there definitely showing a bias in this. But in the end, more ordinary citizens showed up to stand with the mosque than with the protesters. And with overwhelming numbers like that, a false flag became a very high-risk operation. Now then, over in Syria, as you know, documents have now surfaced confirming that, yes, ISIS in Syria is a creation of the United States of America and Israel. Its primary focus is to get rid of Assad by proxy, to deal with the fact that Americans don't want any more war. Now we're getting some rather interesting confirmations, and when we come back from these words from our sponsors, we'll go into those in depth. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, before we went to the commercial break, we're talking about the fact that documentation is starting to surface confirming that ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, is a creation of the U.S. government to manufacture an enemy that we're all supposed to be afraid of, that justifies all war and all taxation and so forth. It's right out of George Orwell's 1984. Emmanuel Goldstein is the model. That's exactly what it is. So now all of a sudden we're starting to see the government respond to criticisms that after all these many months of ISIS in Syria and Iraq, why do they continue to do so well? And the big question is about the airstrikes that the U.S. has been sending in, both to Syria and Iraq. Why aren't they effective? And the U.S. is now on the defensive, having to come up with excuses saying, oh, we don't have enough ground intelligence, they're too mobile, and, you know, we're just dropping bombs on trucks, you know, $250,000 to blow up a truck. They don't even know if the truck belongs to anybody important. This is the U.S. government trying to prove they're opposing an enemy that is actually working for them for Mideast policy. In Syria, it's to get rid of Assad. In Iraq, it's to break Iraq up into multiple segments, new nations, smaller, easier to bully, easier to push around. That's what's going on here. Now, when ISIS captured Mosul last summer, they acquired 2,300 U.S. taxpayer paid for armored vehicles. The Iraq army just dropped it all and left. Huge amounts of weapons here. So right now the U.S. government is asking you to give them more of your money to buy weapons to send to Iraq to blow up the weapons that you bought and paid for earlier. That's how badly mismanaged all of this is. Now, interestingly enough, the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria made an announcement saying that absolutely Al-Qaeda, and for that matter ISIS, in Syria will not use Syria as a launch pad to attack the West, so please leave us alone. And this is more confirmation that ISIS in Syria is actually a U.S. creation to remove Assad. It's another proxy. The American people are sick and tired of war. They don't want any more. So the U.S. is having to project their military policy using proxies. In the case of Yemen, they're using Saudi Arabia. In the case of Syria, they're using ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Same thing in Iraq. All war is based on deception. That's in The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Or as Senator Hiram Johnson put it, truth is the first casualty of war. We're looking at an article over here in Voltaire Net that comments on the fact that Western governments are now admitting that they're using these jihadists to achieve their strategic policy objectives all over the Middle East. These jihadists don't really hate America. They're working for Uncle Sam. And another article that came out over in Middle East Monitor saying, why is the Western media ignoring the growing evidence of Israel's support for Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria? It's all a gigantic hoax. By the way, Blackwater, remember them? Blackwater Sea Academy, they keep changing their name to sort of hide their war crimes. But the International Business Times is reporting that the head of Special Forces chief in Tajikistan, the one that they're making a big deal about, he's just joined ISIS and he's threatening attacks on the United States of America. He was trained by Blackwater. Jeremy Scahill pointed out that Zacharias Massawi, the so-called 20th 9/11 hijacker, had private Blackwater phone numbers in his notebook. If you can't find a real enemy to justify war, you go out and make your own. Nothing new with that. It's been used throughout history all the way back to Roman times, when Marcus Licinius Crassus maneuvered Spartacus' slave revolt to march on Rome, to get himself special powers and emergency authority, which basically marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the age of the insane emperors. Now, over in Yemen, a lot of concern happening there. There was a United Nations chartered ship loaded with humanitarian supplies bound for Yemen. As it approached the port of Aden yesterday, it was fired on to discourage it from docking. What's going on in Yemen is not war by Saudi Arabia against Houthi rebels. It is a U.S. proxy war punishing the Yemen people as a whole for kicking out their U.S. puppet ruler Hadi. And that's why they don't want to allow humanitarian aid to get in. The goal is to starve the entire country of Yemen into submission. So they'll say, yes, we'll accept U.S. puppet rule. Give me a piece of bread or something. That's what's going on. This is, needless to say, under international law and all applicable treaties, collective punishment of a people is a war crime. Under U.S. law, the use of any coercive means to change the political views of a population is defined as an act of terror under the USA Patriot Act. So, anyway, the Saudis are apparently still using cluster bombs against Yemen. Not very good at all. Meanwhile, the U.S. Defense Chief is telling Great Britain they have to boost Army spending. You've got to take more money away from your people and buy more weapons. The military-industrial complex is in high dudgeon. They're out there just, give us all the money. We're going to blow up the planet, and you got to pay for it here. Up in Ukraine, the Donetsk Republic has accused Kiev of 28 truce breaches in the past 24 hours. Kiev continues to violate the ceasefire. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., Senator Rob Portman, Senator from Ohio, is out there saying it's time for the U.S. to step up and help Ukraine, meaning Kiev. So, Senator, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, here's your day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA torture centers. Have fun. The rest of us are going to stay home. Up in the Black Sea, a U.S. Navy destroyer was detected heading into Russia's territorial waters and was chased off by Russian fighter planes. They were able to basically shoo that away. Now, so what's going on in Ukraine? Is it just about bringing Ukraine into the ECB? Well, it's also about oil, and in particular those oil pipelines that transit Ukraine from Russia to Europe. And now Russia has started construction of a new pipeline, the Turkish Stream, ordering the pipe for it, getting the pipeline rights of way to build a new pipeline to sell Russian gas to Europe without going through Ukraine. And the U.S. is attempting to block this in all of the involved countries. They're bringing political pressure. Don't let Russia build another pipeline. It's all about oil and money and petrodollars. That's what they want you, to let your children be killed and crippled for. Money. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And I got to tell you, Sweden is a very cool place for a lot of reasons. And one of them is their politicians have the spine to tell it like it is. So Jens Jerndl was out with an op-ed. And he's talking about these masses of refugees from the Middle East that are flowing outward into Europe, into Great Britain, here into the United States of America, down to Africa, to the point where a lot of the receiving nations are now starting to blockade, and there's even talk about literally sinking the boats full of refugees in the Mediterranean, just drown them and get rid of them that way. And everybody's saying, oh, well, the refugees, it's because of their home governments, they're all dictatorships, it's this, they're fleeing tyranny and trying to get to democracy and all the other platitudes. But Jens Jerndl is out there saying it's all because of U.S. military adventures in the Middle East. If the U.S. had left well enough alone, those people would still be living in their countries, engaging in commerce, living their lives out peacefully, taking care of their families. Anytime the United States goes in to overthrow a country and impose puppet rule, it results in a flood of refugees who don't want to live under U.S. puppet rule. And as these wars drag on and on and on, the refugee crisis gets worse and worse. Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, a couple of other countries going on in Africa. Now, we're looking at basically 1 month. As of today, Obama has 1 month to complete the P5+1 deal with Iran. They're handing out oodles and oodles of your money to Israel to buy their acquiescence to the deal. And I think Israel is getting ready to double-cross Obama, because even as Netanyahu tells Obama, yeah, for enough money and weapons, we'll sit back and let you do your thing, Netanyahu's over in France getting them to add ridiculous requirements to the agreement, like inspection of all non-nuclear military facilities, which Iran has already rejected. I think Israel's just going to take that $45 billion gift from the American taxpayer and still try and find a way to derail this, because this is basically the history of how Israel's government handles these negotiations. Now, story that came out of Press TV over the weekend, John Kerry was quoted as saying the Iran nuclear talks are very constructive. And then all of a sudden, over the weekend, he gets into an accident. He's riding his bicycle in Geneva, and somehow or other gets thrown onto the curb, breaking his right femur. And he's on his way home now on a plane with his orthopedic surgeon to have repairs made, and the State Department is saying, yeah, obviously this is going to have an impact on those negotiations. The timing is a little bit suspect, especially for an experienced bike rider, which John Kerry is. He rides a lot. It's part of his health program. Now, over in Israel, Netanyahu is finally acknowledging the global boycott, divestment, sanctions movement is harming Israel economically. And then he went on with this really bizarre comment about Israel's right to live in the territories they occupy. Well, under international law, when you occupy a territory, it's supposed to be temporary. And you're not supposed to set up shop there, certainly to the extent of displacing the indigenous population. But Netanyahu's attitude is they have a right to go in, grab other people's land, go to live on it, and anybody who opposes that, oh, they're anti-Semites, they're Jew haters, and the rest of it. No, we just have a higher regard for international law and common decency and fairness than the government of Israel does. Now, former Senator and one-time presidential candidate Mike Rivero is out there saying that Washington is essentially having to bribe Israel over the Iran deal to the tune of roughly $45 billion, with a B, and it is absurd because Israel is not part of the P5+1. They are not part of the negotiations. Israel has nuclear weapons, will not sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, will not allow IAEA inspections, has a long history of constant warfare against their neighbors. Yet they point the finger at Iran and say, oh, you should not make a deal with Iran. And as an illustration of just how badly subverted the U.S. government is to Tel Aviv, Washington, D.C. is having to bribe Israel with $45 billion of your money to get Israel to kick back and say, all right, we'll tell our minions in the U.S. government to back off, even as Israel's government goes to the government of France to do their dirty work, to derail this. Now, ex-ambassador Josh Bolton is saying Israel must strike Iran soon. They can't have the deal. And he's out there actually saying that once Iran has a bomb, Israel won't be able to attack them without retaliation. They're not even trying to claim that Iran is going to attack anybody. In Josh Bolton's view, the crime there is not allowing Israel to always have the right to attack their neighbors with impunity. That's the problem. If Iran gets the bomb, Israel can't attack them. Yeah, that's what deterrence is supposed to be about. My parents' generation was sold on this hideously expensive U.S. nuclear arsenal on the idea it would discourage other nations from attacking us. And Josh Bolton is out there saying Israel's right to attack their neighbors with impunity must be protected. They've given up trying to claim that Iran is a threat to anybody because the history is against them. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against a neighboring nation in over 200 years, standing in sharp contrast to the United States and Israel, which these days can't seem to go 6 months without overthrowing, bombing, drone striking, or outright invading somebody else's country. Now, Jeb Bush is out on the campaign trail, and he's out there saying that when he becomes president, he will move the United States Israel embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Jerusalem should be their capital. Has anybody heard Jeb Bush talk about the problems with this country, like the economy, the wars, the failing infrastructure, out-of-control corruption on Wall Street? Does he talk about anything except Israel? And aren't you just sick and tired of American politicians who launch their campaigns with an assurance of what great friends they are to Israel? If you love Israel that much, please move there. Run for the Knesset. Because America right now, in the state that we're in, we need leaders who are going to put America first, second, and third. No government can serve two masters, and we are seeing with our own eyes what happens when we have a government that serves a foreign power ahead of the interests of our own nation. We've had enough of that. Absolutely. Any politician who's out there saying, I'm a friend of Israel, will not be getting my support or vote next year. Absolutely not. Now, we're getting a little bit of a bovine excrement alert here. The Israeli media is out there declaring that ISIS has announced southern Israel will be attacked in coming days. This time from the Sinai, ISIS and the Sinai. This is Israel getting ready to recapture the Sinai away from Egypt with another false flag. And talk about adding insult to injury. I am not kidding you. This is for real. Over in Haaretz, they're announcing there's a new study by Israel showing that the grandchildren of the Holocaust survivors suffer trauma from the Holocaust, and therefore the grandchildren have the right to sue the grandchildren of everybody else for compensation for the trauma of the Holocaust. Meanwhile, of course, all those Palestinians in Gaza who watched their family blown up right before their eyes, they're not traumatized. They don't deserve any concern. We'll be right back after these commercials. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, there is an item out there called the International Peace Index, and they have a lot of different indexes, but they have a list of the most peaceful countries in the world to live in. And first prize this year goes to Iceland. Not surprising, considering that they jailed their crooked bankers, wrote off the fraudulent debt, and things are much better there. Followed by Denmark and New Zealand. Okay, now, sorry to say, and to nobody's surprise, the U.S. didn't make the top 20. In fact, it came in at 101 out of a total 162 nations studied. And once again, I'm reminded of that absolutely brilliant clip from the HBO series The Newsroom, where our protagonist is being interviewed at a college auditorium, and he says, we're not the greatest nation on earth anymore. And we're not going to change that until we stand up and admit it, that we're not the greatest nation anymore. Now then. There's an interesting little article over at IntelliHub. Defense official warns that DoD directive allowing the use of military force against American citizens is the latest step toward martial law. And this was actually published in a corporate media outlet planning military support for civilian authorities. Now, this is all a violation of the Posse Comitatus, unless they're using the Marines who are exempt under that law. Obviously, the U.S. government is aware. They have pushed the American people to the point of losing our temper. And very clearly, they intend to push us even further, because this is a government that will not reverse policy, no matter how boneheaded it is. We saw that with Obamacare, human-caused global warming, the war agenda. They're always right, no matter how wrong they are. And they understand there's a lot of anger out here. Now, we're hearing a lot about this upcoming exercise, Jade Helm. Does it violate Posse Comitatus? Well, if it's a training exercise, no. It only violates Posse Comitatus when they are actively, directly interfering with Americans going about their business. It's a very, very thin line. Now, a lot of stuff out about Jade Helm. And a lot of people are saying, this is it, they're going to do a false flag. Jade Helm is in, I think, 9 states. If they were planning a takeover, they'd be in all 50 states. Because if they do a federal takeover in 9 states, the other 41 are going to start putting up walls on their borders. That's why I do not think this is a takeover of this country. It's obviously a major training exercise dealing with covering large amounts of territory. And there is a clue what may be going on. For the last decade, military training in the United States has been totally focused on counterinsurgency, which is military speak for slapping down the citizens of countries we've conquered because they won't stay conquered. And regular open field warfare against a peer, training for that has been neglected. And I think that's what Jade Helm is really all about. Training our military to traverse large areas of territory quickly without losing their organization, without losing the line, spread across a map. And Jade Helm could very well be a rehearsal for the coming drive across Ukraine into Russia. And they're planting all this stuff about civil takeover and martial law and everything to keep people from figuring out that's what's going on. Because last week, the Pentagon came out and said, you know, the tactics of war against a peer have been neglected in America's military training for decades. It's been focused on going into villages and houses and finding unhappy people and shooting them until they cheer up. Now, getting onto the economy, we're looking at a possible Greek default on Friday, June 5th. And there could be a derivatives upset, even a meltdown following that. The Greek people are doing something very smart. They're getting their money out of the Greek banks as fast as the Greek laws will allow them to. And they're just taking the money out. There's a cap on it. Every day they go back down to the bank. They stand in the lines, and there are huge lines. And the banks have a little number system where they're issuing numbers, and you have to wait for your number to be called to take your money out of the bank. They're doing everything to keep the money in the banks, short of just locking those front doors, which, let's be honest, wouldn't stay locked, courtesy of the people of Greece, who are very, very angry at the way their nation has been plundered by the money junkies. Now, when we got into the 1st of April, the news was saying, huzzah, huzzah, GDP is positive, there's no recession. And now they're hemming and hawing and saying, well, yeah, actually, GDP for the first quarter was negative, just a little tiny bit. The positive side of GDP of last year was primarily because of spending in Obamacare and higher utility costs. Inflation driving prices up, forcing people to spend more. There was no growth in productivity. There was no voluntary increase in consumer spending. Our entire economy right now is being kept alive by forcing you to buy things you don't want. Vaccines, headsets for your radio. Now they're talking about forcing gun owners to buy liability insurance, and I thought your general liability insurance you had on your home anyway would cover that. But they want special liability insurance for gun owners. It's a giveaway to the insurance companies. Force you to buy things you don't want because that's what's keeping the economy going. They call it economic stimulation. Have you ever wondered why the government never cracks down on all these computer criminals? Because by allowing them to run rampant over all of our computer systems, we're all forced to go out and buy computer security software, which we would otherwise not want. And that stimulates the economy. Now, apparently the U.S. was not alone in bad numbers for the first quarter. Canada, China, Greece, Brazil, Swiss, South Asian economies slipped into contraction or looking at more slowing. That old 11th marble is rearing its ugly head. Now, over at Deutsche Bank, they're admitting the U.S. Federal Reserve has been horribly wrong with all their prognostications and maneuvers. They're starting to ask if Yellen is intentionally planning a housing market crash. Because that's how badly it's all being managed. They're living on bubbles. Wall Street's new theme song is, I'm forever blowing bubbles. Because bubbles make a lot of money until they pop. And when they pop, the losses are dropped onto ordinary people. Jeb Bush, when he's not talking about Israel, is out there saying that it's time to move the retirement age for Social Security to 70. That's their solution. The new policy is work you until you drop. And even though it seems like only 5 years, it is significant when you consider how many Americans do pass away between the age of 65 and 70. So these Americans will never collect Social Security. Malaysian Airlines has unfortunately had to declare bankruptcy following the losses from the shoot-down of Flight 17 and the Vanishing Act, also apparently a shoot-down by accident of Flight 370. So they've been driven into bankruptcy by the fallout from that. They're shutting off the water in Detroit starting again. The United Nations has sent a warning to Detroit, expressing their concern. And finally, we're getting this bizarre story. This is actually going back to April of this year. Chase Bank in the U.S. is now telling their clients who have safe deposit boxes that you are not allowed to store cash or coins other than those that have a collectible value in your safety deposit box. Well, then what's the whole point of having a safety deposit box if you can't put gold bars, silver coins in there for safekeeping? What's Chase thinking about when they do that? Why is it no longer acceptable to store your gold and silver coins in safety deposit boxes? I wouldn't anyway, because those boxes can be opened in a national emergency. All right, we got to take a break for our top of the hour news, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Now, here in Hawaii, there is unfortunately a crackdown on homelessness, as if these people could go anywhere else at all. We are an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's not like they could walk back to the mainland, take a step, come up for air, take a step, come up for air, take another step, come up for air. Watch out for the sharks and killer whales. And so the city of Honolulu passed a law saying that you can't be on the beaches of Oahu after midnight to discourage what they call the rough sleepers, the homeless who like to camp out on the beach, because it's unsightly. It looks bad for the tourists. The problem is we have tourists on the island who are basically jet-lagged. They're still on the time zone that they live in. And for people from the East Coast, they're waking up naturally at midnight. And if you can't find anything on TV, and there isn't much, you go for a walk on the beach. A late-night stroll on the beach. Find some little hideaway where you can fool around with your beloved on the beaches of Waikiki, which is a very romantic thing to do. And so now the police are out there on the beaches after midnight. They're writing tickets, and they're ticketing these tourists for being on the beaches after midnight. These tourists are not the target of these tickets, but they're writing them out there. They're very expensive tickets, and the tourists basically have no choice but to pay the fine, because the court date where they could plead their innocence is usually long after they're expected to fly home. Now, despite what our tourism bureau is saying, where they're out there saying our hotels have 85% occupancy, and the part they're not talking about is how many hotels have shut down completely on this island since TSA started groping everybody coming in and out. And I think we ought to be maybe a little bit more generous and forgiving and understanding of the tourists we still have, rather than this boneheaded situation. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Mo in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, welcome back. Great way to start a Monday off, Michael, with you around.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you had a great weekend.
I did indeed.
Good. You and the Lady Claire had some R&R?
Well, we did. We had some family visiting this last week, and it was an excuse to walk away from some of the stress and everything, and we really enjoyed it. And but we're back on track today.
Hey, not to get too personal before I ask my question, but are you guys still moving to the States?
As soon as we can come up with the cash to do so, because we're very concerned that we have a first strike nuclear target out this window here that is going to vanish in a blinding flash of light from whoever it is Obama succeeds in pissing off first. So, yeah, we want to move back to the mainland, primarily in order to get to some place where there are really good singers and college music departments that Claire can throw music at, because here on Oahu there's a strong music tradition, but it's all 1x51, pearly shells, tiny bubbles, and singing in church to make sure that you're going to go to heaven when you die. And Claire writes music that is technically much more sophisticated, and it's actually been very hard to find good singers here, and it's very difficult from here in Hawaii for Claire to approach choir conductors and publishers and producers on the mainland. So yeah, as soon as we can get the money together, we're going to be relocating back to the mainland, probably someplace toward the eastern side of the country.
Don't you have to get south of the jet stream, though, if they do a nuclear thing, you're going to be right in the jet stream with the fallout. I'm in Florida.
Yeah, well, if it goes global, then there really isn't any place safe here. We're very lucky in Hawaii regarding the radioactivity from Fukushima. Most of it is still traveling well north of us.
Well, Michael, I agree with you so much on just about everything. I'm one of the few people that stands up to Israel and tells it like it is, what really happened.
Well, that's why I make the little bucks.
Oh, I understand that, but the PLO should be sending you a monthly stipend. They should just, whatever. You're the best thing that ever happened to those freaking poor oppressed people. You're like the white Mandela,
Well, it's amazing how many people are accusing me that I'm being paid by somebody. The global warming cult thinks I'm being paid by the oil companies, and Israel thinks I'm being paid by the Palestinians, and everybody else thinks I'm being paid by the Russians. And if I am, they're late with the checks because I have yet to actually get one.
No, all I'm saying is, there's all the radio alternative media. Basically, I listen to 95% alternative media, and you're one of the few, that really stands up. I don't care what, I'm not religious like you, but if I'm a Palestinian child and, I have to wake up to that apartheid situation, they should have a picture of you and be saying prayers to you, because you're one of the few champions they have. Maybe I'm wrong, but, you say it like it is. And these people, I'm not a Palestinian, but these people are, it's terrible what they're doing to them. You're one of the few voices that are saying it like it is.
Well, thank you very much for those kind words, and you're right. Unfortunately, there are too many people and too many governments who think abuse of their own people or the neighboring people is somehow a right given to them by the imaginary playmate in the sky. And again, it gets back to the old axiom that the curse of all political power is that it attracts the very sort of people who should never be allowed to have it. And this country was originally set up to mitigate that reality, but we have unfortunately frittered away that glorious gift by the Founding Fathers.
You have a very wonderful way of putting words together. And but my question is, I don't want to keep you on the phone too long here. I don't know if you want to get on the 9/11 thing, but I called, a month or two ago and asked you if you had if you had read Rebecca Roth's. It's actually a fictional book because she didn't want to get drowned.
Yes.
But she was the stewardess for 30-some years, flight attendant, that put the whole thing together, and she wrote this book called Illusion. It's a top seller. Methodical Illusion, I think, is what it is.
I have not, but now that I'm back on my regular schedule, I'll have to hunt it down and take a look at it, maybe get her on the show.
Oh, God, I wish you would, because she really put this thing together, and I just respect your opinion so much that I would love to get your response to this, because, she put it together from a perspective of a working flight attendant for many years. And I think she's put the pieces of the puzzle together. I just want your opinion, and I hope. I'll take
a look for it. I'll take a look for it. Okay. And thank you very much for the phone call, Mo. We're going to try and squeeze in one more call before the commercial break. Steve in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I want to echo what the gentleman was just saying, that I have several sources. I listen to 100% alternative media, but it's hard to know what to believe and what to make of it, and a lot of it I just don't understand. And I really missed you. I really missed you with your 2 days off and the weekend and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Did you help to make it make more sense to me? Now, there was this, James Corbett interviewed this guy that was talking about technocracy agenda.
Yes.
There's Woods. And I'm telling you, Mike, I listened to it 3 times. I cannot understand what they're talking about.
Well, it is a problem when you're dealing with complex issues, finding a way to illustrate it in a way that people who are not familiar with the jargon can understand. And it's not saying that anybody is stupid. Unfortunately, most large industries, whether it's computers or finance or whatever, they develop an internal jargon to communicate with, which tends to obfuscate what they're doing to people on the outside. And you need to break through that. You need to get away from the jargon. And if I have one gift that I do bring to the debate, I'm able to take complex issues and illustrate them in ways that people who are not in on the jargon can understand. Steve, I'm sorry, we're out of time. I got to take a break for commercials. Hang on there. I'm going to bring you back afterwards, okay? We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go right back to Steve in Florida, and you had one more thing you wanted to talk about, I think.
No, I was just, the reason I was calling you is about this interview with this Patrick Wood about technocracy agenda, and I listened to it 2-3 times, and I do not get what they're talking about. You have the knack of explaining things in simple terms, and whatever they're saying sounds important.
Well, I'll take a look at it, and I'm a little surprised. James Corbett, he also has the ability to just distill down and simplify these issues. Some of the videos he's put out about 9/11 and the fake Obama, fake Osama rather, and Abbottabad were very funny and very entertaining, and they got the message across. But I'll make a point of looking at the video and seeing if I can come up with some commentary about it. Okay?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for the phone call. We're going to move along here. Now, as you know, we're coming up on an election year. Obviously, the election season, the campaign season has already started. Everybody's leaping on board. O'Malley has become Clinton's second Democratic challenger going into the primaries. They're beginning to sense weakness, and for a very good reason. A Florida federal judge has set January 20th of 2016 as the day to try a racketeering case against Bill and Hillary Clinton and their Clinton Foundation. Now, that is going to be a major problem for the Hillary Clinton campaign, trying to sell America on a candidate who's facing a racketeering charge, RICO. That's a big one. And I imagine they're already out there trying to get the NSA to get to that Florida judge and say, oh, throw it out. Just throw it out. Nothing there. Lindsey Graham, as we mentioned earlier in the show, has announced his candidacy. No surprise to anybody. He's been over in Israel wearing the yarmulke and getting his picture at the Wailing Wall and reassuring the government of Israel that he will run this country for the betterment of Israel, which is now a requirement for anybody running for president. Tony Blair is in the news again. He's out there. He got asked to make a half-hour speech on the subject of world hunger. Very noble, until you find out he was paid £330,000 for a half-hour speech. How much hunger could you alleviate with £330,000? We've really gotten into a very bizarre area where our politicians are given celebrity status, and they're treated like they're movie stars, and they're not. They're politicians. Up in Maine, rather interesting development, Native American tribes have declared themselves sovereign and basically broken all connection with the state of Maine itself. We're seeing a lot of that out there in the Native American, Native Hawaiian even. It's not working. This partnership with the government, we're treated like second-class citizens. Now, Bob Schieffer is retiring from Sunday's Face the Nation. He's announced it already. And he's leaving with a comment we have heard so many times within the corporate media, that the corporate media should decide what is relevant in the news, and the corporate media's role is to decide what people need to know. And we have heard that from the former president of NBC News and various other people. They actually think they're in the business of deciding what you are supposed to know and what you shouldn't know. And that is actually the job of government propagandists, not the corporate media. The media in this country was granted the right of freedom of speech by that First Amendment so that they could give the American people all of the facts that the American people needed to make good choices. Thomas Jefferson said it is the highest duty of all Americans to keep themselves fully informed so that they can make good choices. And the corporate media is out there deciding that they're going to tell you only what you should know so that you will decide to do what the government wants you to do, which is basically all that propaganda and mind control is about. Controlling the brain by controlling what it knows. Giving you only that information or lies that will lead you of your own free will to decide what the government wants you to be thinking. Another article over at Patriot Rising. Who's afraid of the Internet? Elites panic as information control flounders. And that really is the real revolution of this age. Before the advent of the Internet and the independent media, basically everybody was enforced to be dependent on corporate media, which would tell them what to think, what to believe, who to hate. And they got away with it back in the 1950s and 1960s. Those days are gone. The Internet and the independent media have fundamentally transformed how information flows through society as dramatically as when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing. And we're seeing exactly the same kind of reactions by the elite that we saw back in Gutenberg's time, trying to control it, trying to buy it up, trying to ban it. Because all ruling bodies' power is based on their ability to lie and mislead their populations with impunity. And we have taken that away from them. And they're finally beginning to understand that. Now, common sense would say if you live in a world where you can't lie to the people anymore, maybe the truth ought to be something you'd consider. Unfortunately, when you are part of a government or a corporation that has survived on lies, fraud, and deceptions for decade after decade after decade, you can't start telling the truth. And that's why they're trying to find some way to co-opt what's going on. Now, Mark Zuckerberg is out there with his new idea, Internet.org, which is going to provide Internet service to the third world. The problem is, it's filtered. Internet.org will only carry links and news items that Zuckerberg and his associates think is okay for people to know. To basically so that these people who are on his Internet.org can't see whatreallyhappened.com or anything like that. I wouldn't get too worried about it, though, because America Online actually tried that. Early on, when they were handing out the free discs and everything, you went to America Online, you were primarily on America Online. You actually had to work to get past America Online out to the real Internet. And over time, basically, that business model began to fail. People want the truth. And they'll go wherever they can get that truth. And they're not going to be easily distracted by very expensive newsroom sets and female talking heads in skimpy clothing. Or tight clothing, as the case may be. People want to know what's really going on. Most people do. Some want to be lied to, but only a few. Mundus vult decepi. That's a failing concept right now. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the fact that the politicians, the tyrants, the money junkies, are finally beginning to understand that the days when they could engage in lies, fraud, and deception against the population with impunity are gone, and have been gone for quite a long time. And they're trying to figure out some way that they can regain the upper hand in terms of being able to lie to the population. Now, with the corporate media, it was actually fairly easy. They just had to buy up enough of the corporate media, consolidate it into these large corporations after they got the government to get rid of the laws that forbade large media monopolies, And they could just control it all. And right now, all of the corporate media, what you hear, what you see, what you read in the corporate media, it goes through just 12 hands, all of whom have ties to major corporations and political agendas. There is no diversity of opinion in the American corporate media any longer by design. Could not do the same thing to the independent media. And yes, they put a lot of money into setting up independent media outlets, fancy web pages for the existing corporate media, or setting up whole new entities online that are very well funded but are out there pushing the same agendas. But they couldn't control it all. As soon as they would acquire one domain, 10 other people would set up new domains and go online. They can't limit people's access to the Internet. They're trying to figure out ways they can do it. The FCC is talking about licensing websites now, so that only those who put out the approved government message will be allowed to have web servers. Use a server, go to jail, or some such nonsense. Meanwhile, there's an interesting story coming over firstlook.org, and again, nothing new here. The British spy agency GCHQ has been developing tools to basically try and control the Internet with false information. They have acquired the ability to manipulate the results of online polls, artificially inflate page view counts on websites, amplifies, the term they use, sanctioned messages on YouTube, censor video content that is judged to be extremist. Now, these are all coming out of yet more documents provided by NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden. And it includes a way to connect two unsuspecting phone users together in a call so that there is a record of, oh, this person called a known terror suspect, and or to justify further harassment of them. The other side loves to play dirty. Is something you all have to come to understand. The government loves to play dirty. They take pride in it. We've noticed many times on the music videos that we've done around Claire's music, we'll see the view count go up, then it'll drop mysteriously, it'll go up again, it drops mysteriously again. Because it's got the wrong message. Peace, opposition to war, can't let the people see that. By the way, there used to be this tool for repeated tweeting, because Twitter's a high-volume social media. It was called TweetAdder. And about 2 weeks ago, Twitter blocked them, saying that people had figured out ways to post 200 tweets an hour. TweetAdder says that their software interface prevents that. Twitter stood firm. They're basically cut off. This means that government agencies, corporations, the military, who have their own automated tweeting systems, now have the upper hand on Twitter. They can flood Twitter with their message, because the means for ordinary people to counter that flood have now been shut down. Like I said, they like to play dirty. They always have. Look at the history of COINTELPRO. All that power is, really, is the willingness and the ability to do things ordinary people do not. The willingness to lie, the willingness to steal, the willingness to sabotage, the willingness to kill. That's all power is. Doesn't matter how many robes or flags they wrap it in. That's all that power is. They're willing and able to do things you are constrained from doing. Thou shalt not steal is the message that you get from the guy in the robe at the front of the church. And yet government steals all the time. It's out of control with civil forfeiture. We posted a story to what really happened earlier today. Guy went and sold his boat because he needed money to remodel a room of his house for his new child. And the cops took the money under suspicion of drug involvement. That's stealing. They don't really have a justification for doing that. They wrap it in the law, but it's still theft. It's pillage and plunder of the population. Guy at the front of the church, thou shalt not kill. And yet our government is killing people all over the world. The police are killing people in the streets of America, 8 times as many as the terrorists are. We're taught, be truthful and be honest. only to find our world dominated by liars and crooks. That's all that power ultimately is, the willingness and ability to do things ordinary people will not, cannot, and do not. That's it. That's all it ever was. Now then, this was actually covered on the corporate media. TSA failure. They had an internal check where they had undercover investigators try and smuggle weapons and explosives past the TSA at major airports. They succeeded 95% of the time. Now, the spin on the corporate media is, this shows we've got to give more money to the TSA, we've got to buy more scanners and more swabs and the rest of it. No, it basically shows the system doesn't work, and it also tells us there aren't any real terror attacks. Because if there had been any real attempts to get weapons or explosives on board in a U.S. airplane over the last 10 years, they had a 95% chance of getting through. Because the TSA screeners are too busy groping the hotties to actually do their job. Want to smuggle something onto an airplane? Pick an ugly person. A few weeks ago, we had this big scandal where these gay screeners at TSA were rigging the X-ray machine to sound a false alarm so that they could grope the crotches of handsome young men. And now we're seeing a follow-up article of Natural News saying that this is routine. That TSA routinely sexually assaults and gropes Americans. All the perverts in the country have quit trying to join the church, and they're all joining the TSA. The independent media was right all along. It's licensed sexual perversion. And their own internal investigation shows they're not actually effective against terrorism. And they steal at will from luggage, or they just simply drop things like they did my laptop in Seattle. It's all a giant fraud perpetrated on you, the American people. Now, you're probably going to be seeing on the corporate media the talk about how crime in Baltimore has gone out of control because the police are too afraid of the politicians to actually do their job. This is rank propaganda. The cops are letting crime go out of control so they can sell the need for Americans to allow cops to go on being brutal with law-abiding citizens. That's what this is. They're simply refusing to do their job until we let them do their job the way they want to do it, which is pepper spray, tasers, clubbing, rough rides, and, yeah, innocent Americans get killed, but it's a small price to pay for crime-free streets. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, speaking about Baltimore, Ferguson, Trayvon Martin, the rest of it, I have basically been of the theory that the U.S. government is trying to create a racial crisis, either for campaign purposes next year or to get some kind of controllable rioting going that can be used to justify a national emergency and martial law. And what's rather interesting, there's an article over at Investment Watch blog. We link to it. Controversial journalist, relentless white racism all the time and everywhere is the biggest lie of our lifetimes. And basically, it's from an interview from Future Money Trends, basically saying that the corporate media is selling the idea that there's a racial crisis in this country. Left to themselves, people tend to get along. But they send in agent provocateurs to try and create the idea there's a racial divide. And by the way, the U.S. government got caught doing this before, back in the 1960s. It was part of Operation COINTELPRO by the FBI to go out and deliberately foment race hatred between the whites and the blacks to keep us divided against ourselves, especially at a time where whites and blacks were coming together over the war in Vietnam and the very obvious discrimination against blacks that was institutionalized at the time. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, there's a whole new bunch of anti-gun laws coming out of the Obama White House because they're really scared of you. And one of the laws that is going to be hitting Congress in the very near future is a bill that will require all gun owners to have liability insurance, special gun owners liability insurance. If you don't, it's a $10,000 fine. Is this really going to save the nation from gun violence? Absolutely not. Liability only pays off in the event of an accident. There's no law in the world that's going to stop accidents from happening. But they're trying to force gun owners to buy liability insurance or give up their right to keep and bear arms, which means this is an infringement on our Second Amendment freedoms. And it's another giveaway to the insurance companies, because right now our economy, which can't manufacture anything anybody wants to buy and has destroyed agriculture with this GMO experiment, they're keeping it floating by stimulating the economy, which is government speak for forcing people to buy things they don't want, don't need, can't use. It's another giveaway to the insurance companies, who are crying and wringing their hands. They didn't get as much money from Obamacare as they thought they were going to get, even though the Obamacare premiums are expected to jump by 50% next year. Now, Congress has bowed down before the World Trade Organization and is repealing a requirement that all meat sold in the United States of America be labeled as to where it comes from. Whether it's from which state it comes from, whether it comes from Canada, whether it comes from Mexico, whether it comes from South America, whether it comes from some place that is rife with mad cow disease, you're not allowed to know anymore. The House Agriculture Committee overwhelmingly, 38-6, moved to repeal the country of origin law for beef, pork, and poultry. You don't need to know where it's coming from. You don't need to know if it's coming from a country that's dealing with some kind of serious animal disease that can pass on to humans. Meanwhile, Japan has gone to that same World Trade Organization to force South Korea to accept imports of food from Japan that may be radioactive from Fukushima. Because Japan has gone back to allowing farming in the areas around the destroyed nuclear power station and authorized that food to be exported. By the way, thyroid cancer in Japan around Fukushima has jumped 6,000%. That's fascism. We don't care if the food is safe or not. You will buy it. You will give us your money for it. You will eat it. You are dependent on us for your food. We're out of healthy, safe food, or we're keeping it all for the elites anyway. You get the leftovers. You get seafood contaminated with Fukushima radiation, or rice contaminated with radiation, or seafood contaminated with Corexit and petroleum from the Gulf of Mexico. That's what your lot is in life. You're just the serfs and the workers. You should be grateful to us you get to eat at all. Seems to be the attitude that's coming on down here. More concerns about the Trans-Pacific Partnership that will usurp oversight of pharmaceutical safety away from the member nations and hand it to this supranational committee that'll say, yeah, this is safe, go ahead. We don't care if people are dropping like flies. We have all agreed that this is safe, and that's all you need to know. Now, dealing with the oil spill in Santa Barbara, California, they're trying to keep this one low-key in the corporate media. Apparently, the oil company responsible for this spill hired private security guards to keep the press out of the oil spill area. Don't want any pictures of oil-soaked sea life, especially things that we might be eating in the supermarket in the next couple of months, to keep the press out. Now, when the oil first started coming ashore, people who live there went on down to the beach trying to clean it up, just volunteers. And they were there on the scene long before the taxpayer-paid government agencies got there. And the police chased them out. You're not safe, you don't have the officially required gear, you don't have permission from the government, get out here. And I suspect what the police were really doing was preventing the volunteers from taking pictures of the oil damage with their cell phones and posting it on social media. That's basically what's going on. We can't stop the disasters from happening. We're just going to cover it up, make it go away, pretend it wasn't an issue, and that'll be the end of it. George Lucas' student film, THX 1138, was the film that got him noticed and started his amazing career, and then he remade it. In fact, there was a director's edition with added computer effects that was actually pretty good. It's a good movie. And one of the storylines that are happening in there, I mean, I love the scene where Robert Duvall is in this confession booth at the church, and there's a figure of Jesus that says, "Buy, spend more, you will be happy." I'm getting off topic. The part I wanted to talk about is there's a horrendous industrial disaster in a factory. Kills a lot of people. And the government's response is to simply plaster over the door that went in there and repaint it like it's a hallway. Take down all the signs so that people forgot there was ever a door there at all. That's how they deal with it. And that's what we're seeing here. Now, there's another story coming out of Natural News about the revelation up in Massachusetts that the laboratory used by the police for drug tests was forging results that sent innocent people to jail. Apparently it all came down to this one chemist, Annie Ducan, who apparently felt that being suspected of drug use was such a serious crime that even innocence could not be allowed as a defense. And in the state Supreme Court, unanimous ruling, anybody whose case was connected by this one chemist can seek a new trial. And they banned adding charges or severe sentences being added as a deterrent, because when somebody who's wrongfully imprisoned wants to get a new trial, a very common tactic for the police and prosecutor is, yeah, you can have your trial, but if you lose, we will charge you with XYZ and we will add 50 years to your sentence. Do you want to take the chance on that? And then they wonder why people don't trust the police and the justice system any longer. And this is why, all joking about tarring and feathering and hang-drawing and quartering and rabid wombats notwithstanding, I cannot support a death penalty because the system makes mistakes. It wrongfully convicts innocent people. And until we can restore life to those it is wrongfully taken from, we shouldn't take it in the first place. The system is far from perfect, and we should not grant it irrevocable authority to take a life. We'll be back after our top-of-the-hour news break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We've got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a minute. But I feel I have to comment about that story on the SRN Newsbreak about the hurricanes. There's an interesting phenomenon that a lot of meteorologists have noticed over the years, and that is when they have a heavy hurricane season in the Atlantic. We have a very light one here in the Pacific. When they're having a light hurricane season in the Atlantic, we tend to get a lot more of them out here, and as the SRN story mentioned, we already have 2 hurricanes that have formed west of Mexico, plus a tropical disturbance a little bit closer to us that they're keeping an eye on. Today is the official start of Hawaii's hurricane season, and the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, which is located here on Oahu, has started operation as of today. So we're going to grab a phone call. Speaking of which, George from Hawaii. Aloha, brah, what's up?
Aloha, Michael. How are you, sir?
Doing great.
Good, good. Listen, I think it is going to be a pretty tense season out here for us with the hurricanes, but the reason I did call you was about the NSA.
Yes.
And that's the Patriot Act. I got to tell you, I was in the business for a while, law enforcement, for a long while, actually, retired. And I can tell you that surveillance electronically is the last thing that you use in an investigation. You use informants, you use foot surveillance, you walk the pavement, you try to get a statement, you do everything in your power before you go and get a wire. In fact, to convince a judge to give you a wire takes an act of Congress. It's not easy to get a wire, and it shouldn't be easy to get a wire. And it was never the intention of the founders of our country to have you just eavesdrop on everybody else. So the way you do law enforcement is the old-fashioned way, Michael. You get out there and you infiltrate the groups that you feel are a problem for your community or your agency or your wherever the heck you're doing, and then you get your informants in there and then you pound the pavement. You turn guys inside out and you work your butt off. And if you cannot get information in any other way, that includes physical surveillance, then you may, under some very severe circumstances, probably gambling and narcotics possibly, you may be able to get an electronic intercept. But again, those are not issued helter-skelter, and they shouldn't be. That's just my opinion.
Well, no, your opinion is valid and certainly in line with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But the Constitution and the Bill of Rights have basically been turned topsy-turvy, head over heels by the push for NSA spying, which basically says we can get a wire on anybody at any time, and yet even with the push to renew the NSA spy authority through the USA Freedom Act, both the FBI and the Department of Justice have acknowledged they did not actually get anything actionable out of the system to date. And they've spent a huge amount of money on building these facilities. We have one here in the middle of Oahu. There used to be this giant ring of antennas for VHF interception. They tore that down. There's an NSA data center there now. And they're gathering all this information. Even NSA says that grabbing everything has resulted in a hideous data management program, which actually delays them from being able to focus in on people who might be of serious concern. So this whole thing has just been handled very, very badly in terms of its stated objective of fighting crime and terror. I really have come to the conclusion that all of this, we're spying on everything that you do, is a psyop to discourage Americans from talking to each other, from sharing information on social media and the Internet, trying to keep us quiet about what we're seeing going on with our government. It's not working, but it is a repeat of what the Nazis did in Germany, where they deliberately put out the myth that Gestapo heard everything, saw everything, could practically read minds. Hitler was getting all these psychics to rat out people who were not in love with the fatherland and so forth and so on, because it doesn't look like the NSA is actually doing anything useful other than that. But, of course, the NSA is in a position to get blackmail information on top executives, news media, politicians, judges. That's actually been confirmed. And, of course, they are, Snowden says they're helping themselves to pictures of our significant others in states of undress, and they're trading it around like free porn trading cards. And they're in a position to steal business secrets from American entrepreneurs, to give to cronies, or at least to go down to their stockbrokers and say, buy me 20,000 shares of Consolidated Hawaiian Lint, because I understand they're going to launch a new product in 2 weeks. And
you know, Michael, I agree with everything you said, and it gets to the point where you get information overload in an investigation, and whether you believe it or not, investigations have birth and death dates, because if you let an investigation run itself out forever, you never close a case. So you have to set a time when you stop doing your investigation, you write it up, and you go for a prosecution. Now, I don't understand what they do these days. It doesn't seem that they're doing that anymore, because I see very few prosecutions going forward, but a lot of data being gathered.
They're drowning in the data. I mean, when you add data to a case, it's linearly additive, but correlating all that information is an unlimited expansion. And you can literally drown in the wealth of your own data, which is NSA is now admitting they're having to deal with that. And sometimes cases are kept open simply to keep information in them from being public. If you remember when we had Michelle Rosen on the show about the Tylenol murders case, that is still officially being kept open so that they cannot acquire some of the source documents with the Freedom of Information Act.
See, that's a good point, Mike. But unlike we were discussing earlier, an investigation, if left just to run its course, if you're dealing with dopers or whatever the heck you're dealing with, that'll go on forever. You have to have a time specific when you close the investigation and start writing up the cases. And that's what I don't see these people doing anymore. They just don't seem to want to do what we used to call gumshoe work. You know that.
Yeah, I know the term, and I know the idea that the first 24 hours are the critical part. You're either going to get the case solved there or not. There's even a reality show on that, based on that first 24 hours after the crime has been committed. If you don't solve it then, odds are you're not going to solve it.
Michael, it's good hard work, a lot of dedication, and a lot of stick-to-itiveness. That's what solves cases. That's a simple way you do it. It's not because you collect thousands and thousands of bits of data. It's because you go out and you pound the pavement and you shake the trees.
And you get the data that actually means something.
The important stuff that brings you to an indictment.
Yes.
That brings you to an indictment. Michael, always a pleasure. I enjoy you so very much. And take care of yourself and Godspeed, my friend.
All right, well, thank you very much for the kind words, and mahalo and aloha. And, yeah, I mean, there's a right way to do police work, and it's staying focused on the suspects. It's staying focused on the case. This idea that if we're going to find the needle in the haystack, we need to grab all the hay is nonsense. When you're looking for a needle in a haystack, you don't dump more useless hay into the pile, and yet that is the entire theory behind the NSA data collection system. And I think it's about finding blackmail information, stealing business secrets, and otherwise just scaring us all into staying silent. And obviously, it is not working. It is not working. And again, go to my article, Rivero Challenges the NSA. If you are a programmer, there are code examples in there on how you can write your own systems of encryption so you can protect your business secret, the product you've been developing in your garage for the last 5 years, keeping that information private so that some government goon doesn't beat you to the patent office or to the financiers, the investors. Now then, over in the Netherlands, they have just banned glyphosate-based herbicides, period. End of story. Not allowed in their country any longer because of all of the health consequences that are emerging from that. And good for the Netherlands. We understand the TPP and the TIP are both out there trying to protect Monsanto, protect Roundup, protect GMO, protect glyphosate, to force people to accept it into their countries where it is not wanted. We're coming up on a commercial break. When we come back, more implications of some of the nature, science, health disasters hitting our planet. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, fast food chain Whataburger is having to cut their breakfast hours because we are starting to see a shortage of eggs in the food supply chain because of how many chickens have had to be destroyed because of the bird flu outbreak, which is racing across the country. Now, people have noticed that this bird flu is a problem only in the large chicken factories, where there's thousands and thousands of chickens in these little tiny cramped spaces. They're discouraged from moving around because that inhibits plumping up. They're loaded with hormones, they're force-fed, they're kept in the dark in order to have them mature much quicker than normal chickens. And this illness is just racing through there. And there is an acknowledged possibility that this bird flu can jump into humans. Now, free-range backyard chickens raised the old-fashioned way, raised the way that I knew when I was a kid on that farm in New Hampshire. They seem immune. They're not getting this bird flu. Can't fool Mother Nature. All righty, let's see here. Last week there was this weird story where the Pentagon accidentally shipped live anthrax samples to 9 states here in the United States of America and one of its air bases in South Korea. They were supposed to be inactivated spores, incapable of reproducing, but made available for testing and developing countermeasures, in theory. Somebody really messed up. The U.S. military is saying that dozens of people may have come in contact with the anthrax. They don't know yet. They're talking about 22 people in South Korea, and at least 4 of the workers in the U.S. facilities were exposed to the spores, which they thought were inactive. Now, there are 2 kinds of anthrax, and this is weaponized stuff. Very potent. There's dermatological anthrax, which is well known. It is something that people who work with livestock will get on their skin. It's easy to treat, easy to cure. The part that is really dangerous is when you inhale the spores and you get respiratory anthrax. That is a far more serious situation. weaponized anthrax is particleized to be air suspended very, very easily. And that was a really bad mistake. And it's a little unnerving when you go back and do the research and you find out how often the U.S. government makes mistakes with biological weapons or chemical weapons or nuclear weapons. You're not supposed to know how close you've come to having a mushroom cloud in your home, but it has happened. All right, let's see. We're going to go to the phones here. Frank in Mississippi, aloha. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind? I'm sorry, Michigan.
Hey, how you doing? I'm in Michigan. I'm sorry.
No, I misread the abbreviation. I didn't get to my cheat list soon enough. So you're in Michigan. What's on your mind?
Well, you know, I the other day I took a personality or an assessment exam for this company I was going through the job hiring process with, and I didn't pass it. So that one test right there, because I didn't score the way they wanted me to score on it, I can't get that second interview and then be able to get the job. And I was wondering, like, what happened to this place to where for some companies you have to take an exam just to get the job, and it's not really, knowledge-based or what I know or what I don't know. It's, questions about my personality or this or that, and then they think I can't get the job because I answered this way on this question, or how many questions I might have answered that way on. I mean, what does this world come to when, one little test like that, they judge on whether or not I'd be a good fit, and I might be the best candidate for that position and do the best that anyone could ever do, and they would never know that because they just disqualified.
Well, you're absolutely right here, and I really have a problem with personality tests being a requisite for employment. Unfortunately, every time we get into a situation when there is a huge surplus of workers, employers decide that they have the right to just go on and throw more impediments into the process. Probably somebody is saying the personality test is justified to make sure that you are a good psychological fit for our community of workers, meaning obedient, not likely to ask questions and cause trouble. We know that a lot of companies use intelligence tests. We've actually documented that police departments around the country will actually not hire you if you score too high on the IQ test. They figure you'll get bored and with the work and so forth and so on. And, again, it's sort of treating all of the population like we're these identical, stamped out of the same mold humans, and we're not. We're all unique individuals. We've got unique personality traits. And I certainly would not want that sort of thing in any position where I'm hiring people. I'm just going to meet them and get a read for them. Maybe it's imposed by insurance companies saying that we will not insure you for damages by employees unless you're screening out potential troublemakers with this or that test. And it's just another way of churning up employment for people conducting the tests who can't find employment anywhere else. And if you really look at our overall economy, between security and Obamacare paperwork pushing and the rest of it, our job market as it exists, and there's not many jobs out there, but more and more it's all about processing and guiding along stuff, and less about actually making products for sale. And it's one of the reasons why American products are so expensive, because in another country you make a ladder, the workers make the ladder, it gets sold, and the money comes in. Here in the U.S., you make the ladder, it goes to safety inspection, it gets a sticker, goes to another inspection, gets another sticker. You buy products in U.S. Hardware stores, they got all these different mandated safety stickers all over there, and each one of them represents a job created out of thin air to put stickers on products, to tell people using ladders to make sure both feet are firmly on the ground, like we didn't already know that ourselves. And
right.
So a lot of it is just trying to fluff things up, and I'm sorry you did not get your job in these hard economic times. And
I do have a position currently, though, so I'm not. It was more of going to be a little progression, but I mean, I guess not, and I'll just look somewhere else. I actually have come to the point now where if I find out from now on, that was it for me. If I find out that an employer has a test such as, I will no longer even bother applying.
It may depend on what that industry is involved in, because some industries want very bland personalities like insurance processing, and other things like high tech, they want personalities who are a little bit out there on the fringe here. So in some cases, the personality assessment might work to your advantage depending upon what it is that the company you're applying to does.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah, in fact, I even applied for, speaking, you're talking about police departments, I applied for a police department position in another state. This is years ago. And I was totally qualified. I passed all the physical requirements. You know, I was definitely educationally qualified. And then, like you mentioned, they had me take tests.
Okay, well, unfortunately, Frank, I need to let you go. We're taking a commercial break. Thank you for the call. All right, we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And following on with our story about how the elites are starting to realize they're losing control of the minds of their citizens. We're seeing a renewed campaign to demonize and kookify conspiracy theorists. There was an article at the Huffington Post out there saying that conspiracy theorists will believe anything at all, and as usual, they're out there with the claims that the Apollo moon landing was faked, or HAARP, or chemtrails, or all the really nutty stuff they put out there to try and demonize the independent media. And it really doesn't work at all. And it comes at a very, very awkward time for the orthodoxy as people begin to understand that corporate and official academic government scientists will say whatever they're being paid to say. And that was hammered home by a recent report that came out in The Lancet, which is one of the most respected medical journals in the world, that basically came out and said, at this time in our history, half of everything published is junk. Half of the reports issued by professional scientists and government agencies are flat out wrong. They're produced as propaganda, bolstered by white laboratory coats to promote an agenda, such as human-caused global warming, sell a product such as vaccines for healthy people, protect bad products like GMOs, or even to perpetuate religious myths under the guise of science like the Big Bang. Half. Now just think about that. Here in the independent media, lacking in resources and targeted by professional disinformation operatives, we may not be perfect, but we certainly are batting better than 500 on these situations. Illustrating that point, over at Stephen Goddard, he's documented how NASA has rewritten sea level rise since 1982, multiplying it by a factor of 4. They've taken the data and adjusted it and statistically corrected it to basically look, the sea levels are rising, human-caused global warming is leading to a disaster. Meanwhile, over in Louisville, they set a new cool high-temperature record of 57 degrees. Previous record was 62 degrees. June is beginning with close to a record cool high temperature in Boston, which is, by the way, still dealing with huge piles of snow from this last winter. Al Gore in Climate Science said the ice caps at both poles would be gone by the summer of 2013. Wrong. We've got record ice for the second year in a row in Antarctica and record cold temperatures around the southern oceans. It's going to be another brutal winter down there, and we may see icebergs getting into the southern shipping lanes that normally don't have to deal with that sort of material. Huge scandal about Science magazine having to retract a study that claimed people's attitudes during same-sex marriage were more likely to be changed by face-to-face conversations with gay canvassers. Turned out the study was a complete hoax, complete fraud. And that's coming on top of the Science article claiming that eating chocolate would help you lose weight. That one was an intentional hoax designed to call attention to the fact that a lot of what is published as scientific truth in this country is, in fact, big business. It's not science. It's advertising. All right, going to grab some phone calls here. DJ in Georgia, aloha. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. So I just wanted to bring up a topic. A lot of people might not know you used to work at NASA, so this is a NASA-related question. The recent update on Ceres, the planetoid out there, and I think it's the asteroid belt. What do you think about it? Do you think it's kind of almost like a psyop where it's almost like if you see their website, they're getting polls to see what the public thinks it should be, almost as if to test public perception of what a certain oddity in space could be?
No, this is a PR stunt. You know, NASA doesn't have the reputation and image they used to. They're starting to have people sign up to have their names on spacecraft, which is a bit of a slap in the face to those of us who got our names on spacecraft for actually being involved in the project. Claire actually got her name on the little tiny list of names on the Stardust mission. And that was because she sent some of her music for free for the space station people. But it's a PR stunt. What do you think? A vote on whatever it is. They had polls on what they thought the white spots on Ceres were. And they had a contest to guess the size of the impact crater when the comet impactor hit that comet. And it's all just PR and advertising to get people involved and interested in what NASA is doing. Because they're not really doing anything that spectacular anymore compared to, the 1960s race to the moon or even the shuttle missions. NASA's not doing a whole heck of a lot. We're going to have a rocket launch tomorrow here from Kauai. They're going to be testing this hypersonic balloon slowing device for the Mars missions, and that's going to be taking off from Kauai sometime tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, and yeah, I heard about that also. The second part of it was, do you think that NASA might intentionally, like you said, a lot of the data coming out of these government agencies could be completely falsified or made up to promote a certain agenda? So, as we've seen over the period of time, how certain data on Mars has been changed over time, as more and more activity goes on there, including the moon. It seems like all the data has been changing around. And what do you think do you trust NASA? I mean, do you think that... No,
I don't. The old NASA, where the scientists were in charge, was a very trustworthy organization. The new NASA, which is dominated by politics and corporate interest, absolutely not. I am personally convinced that Dr. Gilbert Levin confirmed the presence of indigenous life on Mars in the Viking missions back in 1976, and NASA was pressured to not acknowledge that out of fear that confirmation of life on other worlds might socially transform our population. We might actually put down our weapons of war and say, hey, let's unite together and find out who's actually out there. The same rationale behind the church locking up Marco Polo when he came back from China. We can't let the people know there's an amazing civilization to the east that hasn't even heard of Jesus. It'll undermine our authority and our power.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to run that.
Well, those of us inside, those of us who were on the inside, you know what NASA stands for, right? Never a straight answer.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Great show as usual. I'll keep listening. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over here to Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. What's on your mind?
Well, I always thought it was not about science anymore. That's the one you taught me.
That's a good one. I like that one. That didn't originate with me. I'm going to steal that.
Well, you can have it. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, you were talking about the weaponized anthrax, and I'm just kind of puzzled why we are in possession of weaponized anthrax. Why there's a patent on the Ebola virus. I mean, Plum Island is still active. May not be on Plum Island anymore, but it's still active doing what they do. And we know it's not trying to find cures for diseases. They're looking at weaponize this and that, and looking at a way if they ever want to depopulate or use it as a weapon to depopulate another civilization, they can do so. But I'm just kind of curious why we're in possession. Because any other country is in possession of weaponized anthrax, we point a finger at that, we villainize them, but for some reason we're okay to have that.
Well, there's a legal dodge that they use here in the United States of America. Under current law and treaty, the U.S. is allowed to develop defensive biological weapons technology, but their rationalization is we've got to come up with the offensive weapon first in order to learn how to defend against it, and that's the loophole that allows the U.S. to go on developing these banned weapons of mass destruction. Got to let you go, Steve. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. We're talking about the failings of science. Remember a while back, I commented how rulers in older times, medieval, Renaissance, earlier than that, relied on priests to convince a population they had to do something. Do what we say because God wills it. You are not supposed to ever doubt what the priests were saying. Go and invade the Middle East. Your sins will be expiated. You'll go to heaven. Go make war on the infidel. Well, religion is falling from grace, so to speak, as the population becomes more aware of science and aware of the corruption of organized religion. Child molestation first and foremost. So the rulers understand they don't have those priestly robes to hide their agenda behind, to insulate it from embarrassing questions. So now they've gone to science. They use scientists to sell agendas the way they used to use priests. And there are, unfortunately, too many scientists who, for generous funding, will go along. Global warming's a good example. There was tens of millions of dollars being handed out originally to any scientist who would prove humans were warming the planet and it was a disaster. And the scientists took the money and cooked up the data and came up with the charts. One of them's right now escaping prosecution for just pocketing the research money and making up the report out of his head. Scientific method is a valuable tool to learn what is going on in the world. The essence of science is reproducibility. A properly written scientific report will come out, say, here's the raw data, here's what we did with it, here are the conclusions. And you should be able to take the raw data, or take your own data, do the experiment yourself, and come up with the exact same result. That's reproducibility. If it's not reproducible, it's not science, it's propaganda. And there's a lot of it out there. And even the Lancet is admitting half of the medical reports, research reports being put out there are junk. There are a lot of so-called scientific journals which are nothing more than paper mills. They'll publish anything you give them for the appropriate fee, so that you can say in your advertising, as published in the Journal of Irreproducible Results or whatever. Which, by the way, that is a real journal, and it's satire, and it's very, very funny for anybody who understands science. So now we have this story, this is out of Investment Watch blog, talking about how Gardasil, the HPV vaccine, is damaging the lives of thousands of young girls. There's a video talking about Emily Riles is a typical case. Perfectly healthy girl, forced to get the Gardasil vaccine. Her health deteriorated to the point where now her mother has had to shut down her own business to be a full-time caretaker of her damaged daughter. Now, Gardasil is sold on the idea that there are 400 people every year, 400 women who are going to come down with this cancer, and we have to vaccinate everybody to stop it. That means basically any randomly selected woman on this planet has a less than 1/10, actually 1,000% of one chance of getting the illness. And yet the vaccine is causing tremendous damage to thousands and thousands of girls. They're making more people sick with the vaccine than would be sick with the cancer. But it makes money. It's a hugely expensive shot. $300 plus. And the caregiver gets half of that. It's a kickback. They're being paid to stick the needle in your kids. They make money off of it. Now, there was a very interesting story. UK's independent newspaper has broken ranks with the corporate media about vaccine damages. They had an article out there saying, yes, there is a problem out there. And they even had a chart about adverse reactions to some of these drugs and how many there are. The leading one, the HPV vaccine, they charted over 8,000 adverse reactions, serious permanent harm to these people. We talk a lot about the swine flu vaccine campaign of 1976, which had to be called off when the vaccine was killing 50 times as many people as the flu. We're in exactly the same situation today with the measles vaccine. The U.S. vaccine court has acknowledged over 100 cases where the measles vaccine has killed the patient. Meanwhile, CDC confirms nobody's actually died of measles in over 10 years in this country. It's all driven by the money. Story out of Investment Watch blog. Experts shocked to learn that the CDC is taking millions in funding from big pharmaceutical corporations. They shouldn't be surprised. CDC is not a government agency. It likes to pretend it is, but it isn't. It's a private, for-profit corporation. Now, a lot of states are starting to pass what are being called the ag-gag laws that makes it a crime to take pictures of corporate farms. And it's now come out, these ag-gag laws are not written by the state governments, they're written by the lobbyists for these large companies. Because they don't want documentation of how they're treating the animals, the shortcuts that they take to produce food at the lowest possible cost. By the way, a little bit of surprise news. Apparently Costco is going major organic food provider. I'm going to have to get myself a Costco card. They see where the trend is going. They're poised to take advantage of it. Americans want healthy, safe food. They're willing to pay extra to get it. Costco is getting on board with that agenda. Good for them. See, we already talked about NASA's flying saucer launch tomorrow on Kauai. I don't know if we'll be able to see it from here on Oahu. I certainly will take a look. All righty, let's see, getting on back here. New Booga Booga scare tactics. North Korea capable of launching lethal cyber attacks that could destroy cities with 6,000-strong army of hackers. North Korea has 4 IP addresses total for the entire country. This is just more Booga Booga to try and get us to hate the North Koreans to sell the war agenda. Britain is proposing a new law that will force Google, Apple, and Facebook to decrypt and hand over messages from suspects under investigation. Now, if there is legitimate reason to suspect these people, I don't have a problem with this. My concern is when it becomes a fishing expedition. I don't like what that guy is saying on his webpage. I want all of his emails to see if I can find something to prosecute him with. That's the abuse of the system. The United Nations has come out with a report saying that strong encryption is crucial for human rights. Encryption and anonymity enable individuals to exercise their rights to freedom of opinion and expression in the digital age without fear of reprisal, and as such deserve strong protection. This is a report from the UN's Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. Even the United Nations says you have a right to strong encryption to protect your messages from a government that has no business peeking into your personal life until they know you are committing some kind of a crime. Alrighty. Another major volcanic eruption in Japan, Mount Shindake. There's been a lot of activity around the Ring of Fire. A lot of quake activity going on here. The good news is down on the Big Island, the swarm of quakes we were having on that south flank has subsided. Madam Pelly's gone back to sleep there. 6.7 quake near Chiricahua Island, Alaska. No tsunami from that one. Here's a good one. Biotech shills, posing as economists, try to boost GMO sales by proposing subsidies for junk food and taxes on organic food. That's how they're going to force you to buy their products. The rationale behind this being that their GMO products are going to be more successful growing in California's drought. That is complete nonsense. Remember the BT cotton disaster in India a couple of years back? Turned out the BT cotton was less susceptible to drought conditions. Farmers lost their crop, their farms, epidemic of suicide all over the place. No, the GMO crops are not more drought resistant. Quite the contrary. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Go ahead and get angry. You deserve it. It's time. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.